If you've ever wondered how a parent survives the unspeakable and continues on even after the premature loss of a child, or if you've felt the weight of inherited trauma, war, addiction, and heartbreak passed down through generations like heirlooms no one asked for but everyone has to carry, or if you've watched grief bend language until it almost breaks, only for a writer's voice to rise from that fracture, raw, honest, lyrical, and unrelenting. Or if you want to read a memoir that isn't tidy, isn't comforting, but it's devastating in the best ways, formally ambitious, emotionally scorching, and structurally inventive. If so, then today's book just might be for you. Today, I'll be reviewing Fee, a Memoir of My Son by Alexandra Fuller. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and here on this channel, I read widely across genres: fiction, nonfiction, fantasy, memoir, history, and everything in between. And then I tell you who I think each book is for. Today's book is Fee, a Memoir of My Son, a haunting, poetic, and deeply personal memoir by Alexandra Fuller. I picked it up as part of my ongoing commitment to read and review all the finalists and winners of the Pulitzer Prize book categories. And let me tell you now, and as is evident by the title, this one is a gut punch. Before we dive in, I want to let you know that I've officially read all of the Pulitzer Prize finalists and winners for this year, and instead of spacing out those reviews over the next few months like I normally might, I've decided to do something different. So, welcome to Pulitzer Prize week, or more accurately, Pulitzer Prize weeks, because the next couple of weeks on this channel will be packed with reviews of this year's most celebrated books, at least according to the Pulitzer Prize committee. I hope you find something in my reviews that sounds interesting to you, and if it does, please check out my 2025 Pulitzer Prize playlist. Let me give you a quick bio of the author. She has had a very interesting life. Obviously, that is usually one of the reasons why people write a memoir, but actually a lot of her writings have been memoirs because, as I just said, she has had an interesting life. Alexandra Fuller is best known for her vivid and unflinching memoirs about growing up in Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, ever since 1980. I actually had to double check that. And she, of course, did this during a time of civil war, as well as personal chaos. Her breakout book, Don't Let's Go to the Dogs Tonight, became a modern classic of memoir writing, praised for its brutal honesty, sharp wit, and lush prose. Or at least so the internet has told me. I haven't actually read it. But based off this book, I actually very much do believe that. Since then, she has written several other memoirs, including Cocktail Hour Under the Tree of Forgetfulness, Leaving Before the Rains Come, and Travel Light, Move Fast, each one peeling back another layer of her family's complicated legacy. Speaking of which, let me tell you a little bit about her background. She was born in England in 1969, raised in Southern Africa, and then later moved to the American West, all of which feature prominently in much of her work. The western portion of the United States is in a lot of her more recent stuff. Her style blends lyrical beauty with emotional rawness, and she's never been afraid to interrogate both the trauma she's inherited and the ones that she has experienced or, in some cases, inflicted herself. Before we go any further, I guess I should issue a spoiler warning, though honestly, there's not much to spoil here. The title of the book is, of course, Fee, a Memoir of My Son. And if you've ever glanced at the jacket copy of the first few pages, you already know that the emotional center of this memoir is the death of her child. This isn't a book built around a big reveal. It's about really the aftermath of it. It's, of course, about dealing with and reckoning with what's already happened and trying to hold it in language and letting it undo you really in any way that she feels appropriate. So, while I'll be going into a fair bit of detail in the next section, know that I'm not really spoiling anything. I think that the heartbreak is the point of it, and if you don't know that going in, then, well, I'm not entirely sure why you would pick up a book like this. That being said, here is my detailed summary of Fee, a Memoir of My Son by Alexandra Fuller. It is one of the most personal and most devastating memoirs, at least of hers, and possibly of any memoir that I have read. It centers on the sudden death of her son, who was called Fee by those who loved him, and it unfolds as a fragmented, grief-drenched, fiercely written attempt to make meaning out of the unimaginable. The book opens in 2018 in the high desert of Wyoming, where Fuller is entangled in a complicated and an already fraying romantic relationship with a younger woman named Till. Her life at this point is turbulent, emotionally volatile, creatively blocked, and haunted by the collapse of her marriage, the estrangement from her family, and the long wake of childhood trauma. She's trying but failing to stay grounded in sobriety and self-understanding, constantly pulled between desire and pain and memory and avoidance. The opening section is titled Must, and that helps set the tone. It is named after the temporary madness that overtakes bull elephants. It becomes a metaphor of the author's own cyclical unravelings. She reflects on her restlessness, her queerness, her parenting, her failures, and her lineage. And the scenes move fluidly between time periods, her childhood in war-torn Rhodesia, her years raising children in the American West, and her brief destructive relationship with Till, the individual that is introduced at the very beginning of the book. But everything in the book bends towards one gravitational moment, which is the sudden, unexpected death of Fee. It is a seizure that takes him, so there's no warning signs, there's no long illness, there's no preparation. He had just returned from studying abroad in Argentina, and he just seemed tired, but fine. One day he was there, I'm sure, laughing, planning his summer, enjoying his mother's food. And then the next moment, he was gone. And that, of course, is going to be the thing that sets this whole memoir into motion. So from that moment, the narrative, it shatters. The author walks us through the before and after with a poetic fury. Her screams, the way her body collapses, her attempt to run towards the river as if she could outrun the news. She recounts lying beside his body and holding his hair and trying to make sense of the senselessness. Her ex-husband is there too, but they are far gone from each other to have any real comfort at an incredibly important moment. They have long since become too detached from each other for them to provide any of the release that either of them need. And the rest of the book really becomes an excavation of her son's life, but also of her life, of her family's many deaths, her siblings, her parents' trauma, her mother's alcoholism, and of course her own survival. She jumps backward to her Rhodesian childhood, her catastrophic horse accident, her mother's suicide attempts, the legacy of settler violence and war, the impossibility of staying sane in a country and family defined by chaos. She reckons with how all of this shaped her. Her love for danger, her capacity for intensity, and her inability to just stay still. And she speaks about motherhood with a stunning clarity. The joy of feeding her children, the long walks, the books and music, the other things that they just shared, the way that grief carves new space in a parent's body. And she reflects on language itself, its inadequacy, its necessity, and how writing is both, especially in a case like this, both a salvation and a curse. So throughout the memoir, the author blends her memoir, her reflection, her cultural critique, and of course an elegy. She brings in everything from Walt Whitman and W.S. Merwin to the adverse childhood experiences or ACE test to Tibetan Buddhism, Roald Dahl, NPR, Zimbabwean border politics, and the American opioid crisis. It's all part of her mental landscape and the way that she can get close to the enormity of her grief. The book ends not with closure, because there isn't any, but with a kind of surrender. She lays her son to rest in prose, in memory, and in metaphor. The pain doesn't end, but she gives it a very important and powerful shape. And so her son Fee becomes both a person and a prayer, and a name spoken with reverence and anguish, hence why that is the name that she gave this memoir. I will be honest, I was very anxious going into this one. The premise alone of losing a child and writing through that loss felt like it would hit me too hard. And so I braced myself for something overwhelming, something possibly too raw to bear. But I would say that this book actually surprised me in a good way. The author, she doesn't write towards the moment of her son's death as a climax. She begins there, and in doing so, she gives the rest of the book over to what's even harder than grief, and that is, of course, living with it. She doesn't try to get past it, she doesn't try to avoid it or wrap it in tidy lessons. Instead, she walks through it and she brings us with her. Not to witness a breakdown, although there are those moments of breakdown, but to explore how language and memory can be tools of survival, even when they're insufficient. And so I found her language captivating. It's poetic, but it's not ornamental. It's exposing, but it's also not self-indulgent. And so ultimately, I found this incredibly rewarding. I appreciated this book far more than I expected to. There is such grace in how she writes about her son, and also such fierce clarity in how she writes about herself. She made me feel her pain, but she never weaponized it, and she never used it to push me away. And I think that is one of the most powerful things that someone writing a memoir can do, and that is exactly what she did here. So, who is this book for? Well, this book is for readers who appreciate memoirs that don't follow a traditional arc, who are comfortable with this fragmented lyrical storytelling that loops through time and memory rather than marching forward, because in many ways, that's just not possible in the story that she's telling in this case. It's for people who value emotional honesty over, we'll say, a narrative neatness, and who are willing to sit with grief, not as a problem to solve, but as a part of being human. If you've read and admired writers like Cheryl Strayed or Maggie Nelson or Joan Didion, especially The Year of Magical Thinking, which I think is in many ways one of the first books that comes to my mind in comparison to this one, then I do think that this book will also resonate with you. It's also for readers who are curious about how trauma as well as addiction and loss echo across generations, and how writing can be a kind of resistance, both against silence and against erasure. If you're a parent or a writer or someone who's lost someone you love, I do think that this may offer something rare. Not exactly comfort, but at the very least companionship in the dark. Who is this not for? Well, Fee is not for readers looking for a neatly structured memoir with a clear beginning, middle, and end. As I've said, she jumps back and forth. If you prefer stories with, a tight chronology or linear logic or a traditional arc of redemption, you're probably going to find this book to be just a little too frustrating. The author certainly writes in, we'll say, fragments. I've already said she has a tendency to write a little bit in loops. And there's also a lot of meditations, which they're beautiful, but they can also be a little disorienting. And so if you're expecting something a little more conventional, this just may not be for you. It's also not for those who are unready or unwilling to sit with grief in its rawest form. Though this book isn't graphic, it is emotionally intense. It asks you to stay present with unbearable loss, not to fix it, but to witness it. And if that's something that you're actively avoiding right now, which is totally understandable, then this may not be the right time for you to read this book. But I would certainly say that hopefully there is a time in your life that you feel like you could take a book on like this and feel and develop an appreciation for what exactly the author is accomplishing. And finally, if you need a memoir with a clear moral or life lesson, I'd say this one doesn't really offer any easy answers. It's definitely much more about surviving than overcoming, and it's really more about presence than any kind of true resolution. Fee is a book I approached with caution, but I'm also glad that I read it. It's not just a memoir about grief. It's a meditation on what it means to keep living after the worst has happened. The author, Alexandra Fuller, doesn't offer us a narrative of healing or closure. What she offers instead is something much braver: presence and truth, and the kind of writing that refuses to look away. This book lingers. It will challenge you. It will move you. And if you let it, it will transform the way you think about grief and memory and the power of language. It's not an easy read, but it is a worthwhile read. Of course, I would love to know what you guys are thinking about this book or any of the other memoirs and autobiographies from this year, or if you have thoughts on any of the other authors' books, please let me know. I would love to know what you guys are thinking. Please let me know in the comments. And if you are enjoying this video or any of my videos, first, please check out my other playlists. I have one for the 2025 Pulitzer Prize book finalists and winners. I also have one from last year for the 2024. So please check either of those out. And if you're enjoying my videos, please share them. The more people that know about my channel, the more videos I can make. And don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.